But I have to say he influenced me somehow. His choice of instruments and his sort of classical leanings and stuff like that.
Hello, welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway. I'm here with my mate, Paul Bindig. We're here for part 2 of Larry Goldings. We're going to keep it short, Paul, because we already talked at the start of part 1. If you haven't watched part 1, what the hell are you doing? Go back to part 1 and watch that first. But yes, part 2, Paul, we cover a lot of really cool stuff, including Larry's amazing humorous works, his thoughts on other artists that inspire him, and just so much more.
Yeah, some amazing insights again in this second part, and I know you'll all enjoy listening to it and or watching it.
Yeah, so jump in and we'll talk to you at the end of this part.
James Taylor is obviously a seminal artist, as you mentioned before. I'm really interested in how that came about, how much freedom you have when you work with him. And you mentioned serving the song, which is coming across loud and clear in your philosophy. What does that look like when you're working with James?
And I grew up on his music, and so it's very meaningful for me to be playing his music. And the band is always great. And we usually have Steve Gadd on drums, for instance, which is just a dream. He's another person who just is sort of a common denominator in all of my favorite records from the 70s and 80s. But in terms of freedom, no, there's not a lot of freedom. And yet it seems that I find a way to be me, depending on the song. There are certain songs, even in the ones that are very much like, this is the part, it's really becomes more about, well, this is my feel, this is how I want it to feel. These are the notes, but I think my challenge tonight is to make it feel good and to, not rush when I hear Steve about to play a slow motion fill that somehow doesn't slow down. It's almost more like chamber music. It's like why, when we played the Beethoven last night, we were a better ensemble than tonight. It's those little microscopic details that you sort of get into, as a discipline. And it has more to do with the feeling and the band playing together better one night than another. But ultimately with James, it's very consistent, because James is very consistent. And he's a great, solid guitar player. And Steve will tell you that his approach is really coming from listening to, having a really good mix of James's guitar. Because James really lays back, and he's got a very kind of buoyant and yet very solid time feel. So it becomes more of a Zen kind of thing, where you're like, you have much fewer moments where you can put in your own little Larry Goldings thing, and that's what it becomes about. And then it becomes, Steve and I talk about this all the time, just the power of leaving space, and when the choice that you make is to not play, and again, that is something that has bled over into my jazz playing, is how less is almost always more, And I've never really been, I don't have the kind of chops that some piano players have, where they can just play anything at any time. So in a way, that works for my technique level. But I like, so it's just a different kind of challenge. And then, there's a few moments where I get to be me on organ solo I have on Steamroller and things like that. But in any of those situations, whether it was John Mayer, Steely Dan, is very much about the parts, but it's about your feel. And I feel like that's why people are calling me for some of those situations, is because that's really what the music requires, is they need someone who's going to be tasteful within that genre, and has a good feel and can play with other people, well. So once you embrace that as the challenge, it's fun, and players are always at a great level. And I learn a lot in those situations. Do I want to be doing it all year? No. And I don't do it all year. I get to, and is it helping send my kids to college? Yes. So those are all things that one decides to have in their life to balance things out. And I happen to be doing it with some of the most authentic, musicians on the earth. So I'm very grateful for it. Sometimes in the middle of a long tour, I feel like, oh, if only I could stretch out with a band tonight, That's okay. When I get home, I'll be able to do that, or I'm going to go out with my trio. So I feel like I have the only thing that's out of balance, not that this is part of your question, is the amount of road work. I really wish that I didn't have to travel so much. I've been doing it like this since I was 19, and it's a lot, especially the jazz tours are difficult, routing and economy seats and all of that stuff. It's a very bizarre life, and as you get older, it becomes harder. And I think that's not going to, and that still, seems to be my bread and butter throughout the year, is traveling. And the more and more artificial intelligence takes people's jobs away. The only thing that I think they can't replace is live music. So, and don't get me wrong, I love playing for people. I love that whole, I love playing live. It's the long travels that are hard.
Yeah. And I do want to ask you, I want to put a slight Australian flavour on it, and two authentic artists. You mentioned about authenticity. The first one is Colin Hay, and ironically enough, I watched Colin Hay play Gigless just over 24 hours ago with his band. Just interested in your recollections of working with Colin, who, from an Australian viewpoint, is iconic, but at a worldwide level is also very well known.
Great. I love, I've done not that much with Colin, but I've been in the studio with him, and I know him personally through my friend Chad Fisher. And he's just, vocally, he's just as great as he always was, it seems to me. And those songs are part of my childhood, and they still hold up. And those are great songs, and he still writes great songs. He's a great solo performer. Very inspiring to watch him do his own solo work. He's great at storytelling and structuring a set, and very funny guy. Seems to know a lot about music. I would like to write with him and do more with him. But I don't think I've ever, never went on the road with Colin or anything like that. But really thoughtful artist. I think he's great.
And the other end of the spectrum, Larry, is Sia. So what was your involvement there?
This guy I just mentioned, Chad Fisher, who I met at music camp, by the way. So we've known each other since 12. We were about 12 or 13. When she was, well before she was writing for the who's who of the pop world, and while she was still maybe in the band 07, and hadn't really spent much time in LA. She was making an LA trip and was just looking for writer collaborations. And Chad recommended that we get together. And that's how I met her. We wrote something for her first or second record. And she had this idea of, at the time, I think she said, I want to write songs that are just the names of different flowers. And really, in the end, they ended up being kind of children's songs. And so we wrote, and this is still something that's only seen the light of day because somebody apparently got into somebody's Dropbox and put some of them up on YouTube, some of our demos. This project has not seen the light of day yet, because by the time she got back to, a few years after we got together and wrote about 11 songs together, for what seemed like it was going to be like a children's record, she just started to be in demand, as a pop writer, and has had a very busy life. I'm told by her manager that something's going to happen with these songs. But we had she was writing so quickly, and we were both writing very quickly in the same room. If she didn't have the full lyric, she'd go outside and sit on this little bench outside of my house we used to live in and come up with lyrics. And she kind of has this inner child or something like that allowed her to write these beautiful songs. There's a project there, hopefully that's going to turn into either like an animated movie or, this is what I dream of. And one of them we did put out for some kind of fundraising record, and I can't remember what it was. But we have a whole record of songs. So
amazing.
We get to do them. She's a great artist, great singer, really interesting. And I don't think she plays any instruments, but her instincts are amazing. She'll say, no, not that chord. No, this one, that's the one, she's got that kind of ear. It's really interesting. The other cool thing about working with like singer-songwriters, the really good ones, is just their instinctive qualities, especially when they can't describe anything musically about what they're looking for. It's like, wow, how do you do that? Actually my daughter is a little bit like that. She's becoming a really good songwriter, but she doesn't really have the theoretical knowledge, but she finds stuff, so it's fascinating. But C is great. I think it'll be a really cool project when it sees the light of day.
You mentioned when you were talking about Colin Hay that one of the things you appreciated about him was his sense of humour, and he's a funny guy. And Jack Lemmon was fond of saying, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard." And I bring this up because I feel like to properly satirise something or see the humour in it, you have to understand it really well first. And where I'm going with this is your humoristic alter ego, Hans Groiner. Now, for our listeners and viewers who aren't familiar with Hans, just go into YouTube and type him in the search bar, and I'll let you enjoy the stylings of Hans Groiner. But I'm interested, Larry, in where does that character come from, and also some of the other humorous things that you've done as well. So we've seen you madly trying to transpose behind someone who is singing the national anthem, maybe unintentionally in several different keys. Right. And one or two other things too. So fascinated in where this comes from and what this, what bucket does this fill for you doing the humour?
Well, I often feel like if music hadn't worked, even right now, if say Christopher Guest called me and said, "Can you drop whatever you're doing and collaborate, or do the music for my next film?" And I would do it. If Bill Hader or Fred Armisen or any of the Martin Short, who I actually got to do 2 gigs with,
wow,
a dream. I'm a huge comedy fan. I grew up loving Steve Martin, Woody Allen, Monty Python, and then in terms of specifically musical comedy, well, Monty Python, of course, but Victor Borge. I loved those Victor Borge. So it's just always been just as much a passion as a spectator, as it is music. And Dudley Moore, of course, was a great pianist, and I think and the list goes. Oh, Jack Lemmon, right? Did he play piano? So that's always just been a passion. I just I also acted in high school and things like that. But the Hans thing, really, if it weren't for the internet, of course, I don't think I would have tried any of this stuff out. But I think it was a Curtis Steiger session I was on. It was the end of the session, and Peter Bernstein remembers me doing a version of Hans, which was just like, what if John Tesh or some new age piano player played Monk? And it was sort of like a party trick that I was sort of able to easily do, And So I think it started with that just general concept. And then remember MySpace, I had a MySpace account, and I was like, oh, I could make I'm going back to that session. We had some extra time, and I just started doing some of these New Age monk things, and the engineer said, hey, I'm rolling, So me in the rhythm section, which I think was Matt Wilson and Ben Ellison, I want to say, I just quickly was like, let's do it like this. And I did like 30 seconds of 5 different monk tunes, but as a New Age artist. And he then he had burned it for me on a CD and sent it to me. The internet was new, and I had a MySpace account. I thought, oh, let me see what happens if I put these out as some idiot, who is posing as a monk expert or something. And that's when I searched the internet for that name to see if I could use it. And so I came up with Hans Groiner, found a fuzzy picture of some random person, and that was the Hans Groiner, and just uploaded these 5 30-second clips and wrote up a little fake biography, just because I was like, oh, I'm going to send this to a couple of friends. And it's the thing that taught me the power of the internet. I mean, before you knew it, it was all over the place. This was just audio clips and a fuzzy picture of a person and a bio that talked about who Hans Groiner was. And it just like went around, and people I was fooling people. There was plenty of people who, especially before I decided to do it as a video, people who were really irate that some person would think, that this was cool. And so I was just sitting back anonymously, just enjoying the whole thing. And then a few years later, somebody said, you got to come out and do, then YouTube became a thing. And I don't know, somebody twisted my arm. I went to Target and I bought a wig, and a friend of mine, Liz Cole, who's the sister of, who's very talented herself as a singer and trumpet player, but also she went to film school. Her brother is Lewis Cole, great drummer and composer. So I was like, Liz, you want to help me make like a little fake mockumentary short, and that became that first little Hans Groiner thing, which was totally coming out of like a Christopher Guest, kind of Spinal Tap kind of inspiration. And that's the thing that really got around. And I had no idea it was going to fly like it did. Next time I went to a jazz festival, everybody who knew me said Hans, or people didn't know me. It was like, and it was a crazy thing. And I instantly sort of regretted it. but then my friends who knew me as someone who liked comedy were like, no, it's great. Keep it going. And I've actually done a handful of Hans Groiner gigs and things like that. It is much harder. The reason why I don't do more Hans Groiner gigs is it's one thing to just release, those little things, or to prepare a 5-minute video or instructional video, and another thing to like present it as a show where maybe half the audience won't even know what's going on, And I am not Christopher Guest, and I'm not any of these people that I mentioned. It just takes a lot of courage. And in fact, the first time I did it live, within the first 2 minutes, I started breaking character. I started laughing, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing? If you're going to do this, do it, but I'm not an actor, So it's just a hobby. It's a hobby that has taken on a little bit more of a, and the other thing, yeah. And then COVID happened, and I had nothing but time, and I was also going crazy. It just, for me, it's just another creative outlet, really, is what it is. It's the only reason why I never do anything funny and decide to put it out is for the challenge of like, can I do this and have some people whose opinions I respect say that's funny, when Alan Arkin, the great actor Alan Arkin, because I know his son, he told me that my dad I showed him Hans, and he actually told me about 5 months before he died on a FaceTime video, that's great work. And I was
Wow.
like, well, shit, So who knows where it's going to go? What I've learned from it is, and what I've always done to an extent, as long as I've been doing solo gigs, I try to be entertaining to a point between songs, on the mic. So I've been able to learn some stuff from it. One is that, and what I learned during COVID when I put that thing out with that, made it look like I was accompanying that horrible singer at the CPAC convention. People at that time really needed to laugh, and I couldn't, and it went viral. And I heard from friends, there were people that I hadn't heard from in years. Like, my son showed this to me. With all the crap that's going on in the world, it really did drive home, like, wow, laughing is really important, and if I'm able to do it without ruining my musical career, or ruining my credibility as a serious musician, why not? And on the road I have a lot of downtime, and I'll either do instructional videos for my Patreon, or I'll find a way to be creative with humor. It's very much like music, it's timing, rhythm. I guess I do have this fantasy that I could maybe do that in a more legitimate way. Whether I take that step or not, I'm not really sure. I kind of have this fantasy of doing like a YouTube series called maybe The Guy with the Gig, which I think is what I called that thing. Did you see the Close Encounters one?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. That was The Guy with the Gig. And that was my same friend, Chad Fisher, who did all that, superimposing me into the film. I mean, I'm really interested in that, that's just pure pleasure for me to try to make something that could stand up to, that, I mean, I look at Spinal Tap. I know that they're doing another Spinal Tap. I cannot wait. All of those Christopher Guest movies, Sacha Baron Cohen, all those kinds of people, to me, they're just heroes. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll take a plunge to do it for real. Because again, I feel like I would need help. I would need like maybe some writers, someone to help me structure the thing. And because I'm not about to go out there and do stand-up comedy. And people say that to me all the time. You should do stand-up comedy. It's like, that's a whole other level. But it'll be cool. It'll be interesting challenge. Again, it's just a creative. If it's creative and it challenges me, I'm down to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was 25 and I was still making a name for myself in the music world, maybe that would have been extra confusing. Now I kind of feel like, well, Trump might win again, and the world just might fucking end. So what the hell?
Yeah.
But I love humor. My father's pretty funny, and I've done a bunch of live gigs with Melinda Sullivan, and to see the sea of smiling faces like that is really a rare thing. I tell her all the time, I don't see this at my own gigs. How do you do that? It's really a powerful thing to make people happy,
Yeah.
So I'm into it. And I appreciate you bringing it up. I'm always looking for some angle to try something. And also the whole thing, I'm fascinated with the whole idea of not going viral, but just like, finding some niche that hasn't been tried online. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm just throwing things out there. Somebody gave me somebody who has gone viral a lot. Basically, he told me before I arrived at this thing, I was trying different thing every week, just to see what stuck. So some of it is that I'm just throwing things out there just to see like, oh, because sometimes you just have no idea if it's really good. You have to get feedback. So, I'll keep trying different things.
And I hope you do. I think, we need a series, and if we can have a Larry Sanders show, we can have a Larry Goldings show, in my opinion. But we'll see how we go.
Larry Sanders, another one.
And speaking of laughing, Larry, are there some musical moments you can look back on and laugh as far as a train wreck that's happened for you on stage performing, whether as yourself or as a sideman or wherever?
I was thinking about that question because you told me you were going to ask it. I mean, yeah, there have been like at jam sessions that I used to play at. There have been loads of train wrecks. The worst thing that can happen, more than I'd like it, is an organ that just breaks down, and that happened recently in Chicago, and it was just such a drag. It wasn't funny. It was a drag for me and for the band and for the audience. But so those unfortunately, those kinds of things happen. I can't think of a particular musical train wreck other than, well, are you familiar with Johnny Bowtie Barstow?
Yes.
Yeah. That was maybe the first total accidental musical comedy thing that I publicly got into, and that was just because I was so fascinated with this guy. He used to come to this jam session in New York, and I was the house piano player, and he signed up and he wanted to sing all these obscure old standards, and young kid, real confident voice, absolutely no sense of time or pitch. And I just thought, wow, but my instinct was to follow him and to try to make him sound right. So that became a shtick. And then I started recording him on the sly when he would come. And then I eventually felt guilty about it. And I told him, he was like, oh, that's okay. And I said, would you like to make it? Christmas was coming around. And I said, I have a 4-track in my apartment. We could make like a Christmas tape to send to people. Still sort of not, I didn't want to hurt his feelings because I genuinely felt that he was a fascinating specimen. And because of my sick musical mind, I wanted to see what would happen if we just got together and played a bunch of Christmas tunes. And it was exactly as I had hoped. It was completely bizarre, and I just had to try to wait for him when he would decide to come in. And that thing also got around a lot back in the day. And then I eventually put it out on CD, and that kind of train wreck I completely welcome. I love musical oddities like that. It's really fascinating to me. It's just sort of a glimpse into the human brain. So those kinds of things I really love. And anything that's on YouTube in that kind of realm, I'm really into. When things go wrong in music, when you can see all like quick takes of like kids that playing in college or high school when their keyboard stand collapses. To me, it's just what can you do after that? Nothing. It's over. It's pretty funny stuff. But there's a great bagpipe one, the guy at a wedding, and the bagpipe, and then he goes through a doorway, and the top bagpipe hits the doorway, and then he just sounds like a dying animal, and the bride and groom are just fantastic stuff. But that's one of the reasons why I love Christopher Guest and all the musical humor. It's just fantastic because it is a bizarre life. There's so many things that go wrong, and that go wrong in the sort of amateur community. It's unbelievable.
I think that's what makes his humour so appealing. Is it's just so real for anyone has been in a band or in a musical situation at any level at all. It's just so real.
Yeah.
Which gets back to my idea of you have to understand something really well to really make it funny for other people. I think. Just on the subject, Larry, of the organ breaking down, I understand this is not an unusual thing with Hammond organs. Are you someone who is pretty good under the hood? Like, are you able to fix things if you need to, or do you have people to help you do that?
Unless it's one of 3 or 4 easy things, and I've recently learned something about how to fix the percussion switch, but no, I'm not, and I ought to get better. It's sort of I'm same thing with cars. I'm a disaster with car maintenance, but yeah, over the years I've picked up some knowledge, and it would be an important skill to have. And is the reason why playing something digital is a little safer, but disappointing musically. But yeah, unfortunately, you can't find a real organ that's less than 40 years old. So, and places they turn it on, they go, sounds good to me, send it out, and there could be a whole slew of problems with it, So it's that leads to that's the cause of my sort of love-hate relationship with the organ. There's always some kind of problem on the road with an organ, which is part of the challenge, of playing the gig. And the same thing is with pianos, but with pianos at least it's not an electronic instrument, and there's less mystery about how you get it, about what's going on with it.
So, Larry, a question we ask all of our guests is, if you were to tag a keyboard player or recommend someone that you would love to learn more about that we might potentially interview on the podcast, who do you think would be a fascinating subject that you would love to learn more about?
I mean, one of my favorite jazz piano players these days is Sullivan Fortner. I think he's an unbelievable musician. I'd like to learn more about him. My wife recently went to see Elvis Costello, and I used to love Steve Nieve.
Yeah,
and I know very little about him, but I have to say he influenced me somehow. His choice of instruments and his sort of classical leanings and stuff like that. I'd be interested. I'm surprised I haven't really done a deep dive on YouTube about him. Come to think of it, but I think he's kind of underrated.
He is.
Very unique. Garth Hudson still around? I'd like to see him interviewed.
I think he is, yeah. All right, there's 3 good picks, yeah.
He still lives in Woodstock or something like that. I don't know. I think he's had health problems maybe. I know his wife had health problems. But I know Jack DeJohnette knows him because they both live up there. But he's another hero of mine who's still around. And I wish I had spent time with Billy Preston. I did get to meet him, though, briefly when he was with Eric Clapton.
Wow.
But anyway, you can't interview him anymore.
No.
And there's lots of interesting young people. My friend Jake Sherman is always he would be fascinating to talk to. He's a really interesting multi-instrumentalist and has a different take on things. Those are some names.
Yeah. No, there's the next year's podcast sorted. Thank you, Larry. And then our second last question, the Desert Island Discs question. So 5 albums, if you have to pick them, what would they be?
Yeah, it's so hard. I wrote some down. It's impossible even to limit it to 10, but
yeah,
I wrote down Facing You by Keith Jarrett, Thelonious Monk Plays Duke Ellington, Ahmad Jamal at the Pershing, or anything from that era, and just to get eclectic. Someone that really over the last 10 or 15 years, is a composer named Mompou, Spanish composer, Mompou, and when he was older, he made a bunch of records of his own music, and I think it's just Mompou Plays Mompou. One that a lot of keyboard, even organ players, don't know about is Billy Preston, the complete VJ sessions. The second half of that, it's like a compilation of 2 records. The second half of that is a record he made when he was really young of just gospel music, just solo piano or overdubbing piano and organ. And he couldn't have been more than 25 years old, and it's still, to me, one of the great things to attain to. Complete VJ, Ray Charles, Genius plus Soul equals Jazz. And I've just, too many to mention.
Yeah.
Those are just
amazing picks, though. And I think you've picked all new ones, so compared to previous guests, so that's amazing. And our very last one, Larry, is at what we call our quick fire 10. So 10 very short and sharp questions, and I'll let you kick off, Paul.
Okay, thank you, David. The first question is, what's the first album that you ever heard?
I'd have to say, I'm seeing like my brother's like Beatles records. So earlier Beatles, like I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah, great. Most important pre-gig ritual, Larry?
These days, it's to do these back stretches where I stand against a wall and I keep my arms aligned with the wall, or I have this yoga strap and I do like 10 of these just to stretch things out. That's one of my rituals.
Yeah, nice. We should probably all warm up a bit more before we gig. It's actually really good advice.
Yeah.
If you hadn't been a musician, Larry, what do you think your career would have ended up being?
I mean, I'm really into film, and as we discussed, comedy. Although I don't think I'd be a stand-up comedian, but I like the whole idea of editing, film editing, and sometimes think that could have been something I got into. Yeah, I think that's the closest thing that I can think of.
Great. I know you've completed a masterclass with the amazing Hans Groiner. So when you're playing a jazz turnaround, do you turn your head to the left or right?
That would be to the right. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. What's been the favourite gig you've ever done?
Jeez, I don't know. Gig. I love playing with my own group. So, any pick the sweetest night, with that band. And I have so many good memories with John Scofield's band, with Bill Stewart and Dennis Irwin. Those would be two. I can't pick one.
That's okay.
Yeah. So
no, that's fine. And one of your favourite cities to play, having done quite a bit of travel, as you mentioned, what's a city that tends to stand out for you?
Recently, the trio played like 3 nights in Copenhagen. It was just so fun, and the audience was so knowledgeable and warm and great. And that would be one of my favorite cities.
In the last year, could you name a favourite song that you've played live?
Yeah, let's see. Recently, and this is actually going to be a record that comes out, I did a live piano trio with sort of like what's become sort of my piano trio, some LA guys who are fantastic. And we've been playing I Will by Paul McCartney. And that's been really fun. Particularly with these guys. Their names are Carl McCannis Reichel, bass player, and Christian Newman, who plays drums with Jake Collier, but he's a great straight-ahead player. And that's sort of my little piano trio that's going to come out in next year. Brilliant.
Now, Larry, I think I might know the answer to this, but you might surprise me. Your favourite music documentary or movie?
The Beatles one.
Get back. Yep.
That I just thought that was maybe one of the most important documents that I've ever seen. I mean, anybody who doesn't want to start a band after seeing that movie, that's one of my favorites. I love The Last Waltz, and there's a few really good ones out there, but the Beatles one comes to mind.
Yeah, that was stunning. It was absolutely stunning. Who knew at this time we could get this extra insight into the way they worked together and collaborated? It was just amazing.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and the way everything perked up when Billy Preston got there too.
Oh, yes, that brought a tear to my eye. I don't know why still, but yeah.
Wasn't he like a force of nature, just walking into that room and suddenly everyone was happy again? It was incredible.
Yeah, they were like, this is the kind of we want to play with people like. They couldn't believe they were playing with someone like that. And he was, the way he just fit in musically, was the perfect example of how to, but he didn't take over, he was like the perfect studio musician. And but that documentary is totally fascinating and really well made. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. Wonderful. One thing you would like to see invented, Larry, that would make your life as a pianist or an organist easier?
Either a sampled piano keyboard that somehow vibrated and even went out of tune when you played it, at the same pace that a regular piano would, because it's just so unsatisfying to have to play a fake piano. And I feel like with all the technology that something like that could happen. And either that, or a Hammond organ that could start at this size, and you press a button and it expands into a full-size organ. That would be great.
I'm seconding that motion. No, brilliant. And the very last question, Larry, what keeps you sane outside of music? So what do you like to do as a hobby that has nothing to do with music?
I like to watch, good comedy. I've been, I like to read, spend time with my kids, and, movies, biographies in particular. Right now I'm reading one about the painter, Mark Rothko, which is really interesting. We have a pool, and I'm really getting into swimming here in the morning. That's fun. But those would be my main hobbies, I guess.
No, brilliant. And look, if ever someone deserves to have a biography written about them, it's you, Larry. I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us in our time this morning. Where I feel like we've barely scratched the surface like we do with a lot of guests, but it's particularly the case with yourself. We can't thank you enough, though. You've gone well above the call of duty. And we look forward to. I think we only missed you down under in the last. I assume you were down with James Taylor in the last year.
Actually, I wasn't able to do that tour because I was out. I'd already booked my tour with my trio.
There you go.
Kevin Hayes went to my place, but Kevin Hayes. I don't know if you're familiar.
There you go.
He would be a good call. Very interesting.
Noted. So no, can't thank you enough. Hugely appreciated, and we look forward to seeing all the stuff that's still to come in the future.
Thanks, guys. Good to know you guys. Thanks for reaching out.
And there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed that 90 or so minutes across the two parts of Larry Goldings. Paul, I know I felt it was a privilege.
Oh, it was great. I pinch myself, David, that we get to do this. We talk to keyboard players that they're superstars in whatever their various aspects, and Larry is certainly one of those people. And wow, I just loved hearing his thoughts on a range of things. I have to say, I really enjoyed when we did the Quick 510, the way he answered your question about the jazz turnaround. Do you move your head to the left or the right? And the way he just went, that would be to the right. It's a completely serious, deadpan delivery.
Yes. And we will.
So he's really inhabiting his Hans Groiner character.
That's right. We will link to that specific episode. I didn't actually say this to Larry, but I had to plead ignorance on Hans Groiner until doing the research for the show. I don't know how I missed it. I absolutely had come across his other Close Encounters and the CPAC stuff and all that, but I for some reason had missed Hans Groiner. So it was an absolute pleasure to discover that at the last minute as well. But yeah, we'll be linking to that particular masterclass video of his. It is just packed full of laughs. It's just amazing.
Well, speaking of things we missed, I hadn't heard of Johnny Bowtie Barstow. I'd never heard of this, and when he mentioned it, I thought this sounds really interesting. So what I did was, since we finished, I did a quick Google search and I found a review of the Christmas album that Larry Goldings did with him. And I'm going to encourage our listeners and viewers to check this review out. It's hilarious. So this reviewer has really approached this with a great sense of humour. It's on the website All About Jazz.
Right.
And the review is by a gentleman named John Kelman. So just do yourself a favour. It'll take you 5 minutes or less to read the review, but it's very, very funny.
Excellent. So now there we have it. I do hope you enjoyed the interview with Larry. Can't thank you all enough for listening. We love hearing back from you as well. And thanks to all those people that do give us all the comments and feedback after each show. So you can do that via our Facebook page. Everything is listed as the Keyboard Chronicles. So Facebook, Instagram, Threads. I'm not really on TikTok, but we do have a TikTok account. Are you
going to do some dancing, David? Some TikTok
No,
dances?
that's never happening.
No?
Then... No. And then, obviously, good old-fashioned email, editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We love getting those emails as well. Quick shout-out to our gold and silver supporters, Dave and the team at the musicplayer.com forums. Can't thank you enough. Also, we've got Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew, a long-standing and passionate supporter. Thank you, Tammy. And we've also got Mike from Midnight Mastering. If you're looking to, mix and master your own works in a high-quality way, Mike is the guy. So midnightmastering.com. So thank you, to all those gold and silver supporters. Thanks to our Patreon supporters as well, more broadly. And, Paul, I don't think I've even mentioned this to you, and probably only Joe's listening again, but we've also fired up on Substack. So what we're starting to do, and it's a bit of a what we call it, an intensive process, but we're bringing long-form written content from these interviews to Substack. So if you subscribe to Substack for a couple of dollars a month, so whether it's on Patreon or Substack, you'll essentially get the same thing. But if you want written content, Substack would be the place to go. And you get to read some of these amazing interviews, and they're edited, curated, pulling out all the ums and the ahs and all the other bits, and just to make them, really entertaining long-form reads. Because long-form reading is a dying art, sadly, but we're trying to keep it alive, at least in regards to keyboard players. Anyway, just that. If you search for the Keyboard Chronicles on Substack.
Sorry, David. Sorry, David. I was going to say you had mentioned that to me, but I think that's an excellent initiative. So. And it's just a nice way to digest the interviews, and we've now brought up quite a catalogue of information. What a great Sunday afternoon read with a glass of wine, learning the thoughts of some of our illustrious guests, and with all Paul's fumbly, umming and ahhing and tripping over words during his questions.
You do less than me. You do less than me, and I can also confirm it's 100% AI free. This is hand edited. So no AI assistance involved, I'm proud to say. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Again, thank you all for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but in the meantime, keep on playing.